Hello guys, Unabridged here, and today we're going to be continuing the tale of Emily Windsnap, Chapter 13. My lips moved soundlessly behind my hands, scanning all the words I could summon up, half-remembered prayers from half-listened to visits to friends' churches. Why didn't I pay more attention? I asked myself. When I got to, Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, I couldn't for the life of me think what came next. Emily! Mom was tugging at my arm. I shook her off. I'm busy. Mom tugged again. I think you should have a look. I opened my fingers wide enough to sneak a peek between them. It was hard to see anything, actually. The boat was careening up and down as so much. I felt even more giddy and reached out for the railing. That was when I heard it, someone calling my name. I looked at my mom, even though I knew it hadn't been her. Holding holding the railing beside me, she pointed out to the monstrous waves. Wow, mountainous. I don't know what the word that meant. Okay. Mountainous waves with her free hand. Emily! A familiar voice called again. Then a familiar head poked out above the waves, bobbing up and down in the swell. It was Shona. She grinned and waved at me. What are you doing here? I shouted. It's Monday. You didn't show up at the rocks. I've been looking for you. Oh, Shona, I'm so sorry. When you didn't come, I had a funny feeling you'd do something like this. I've messed it all up, I called, my throat clogged up. We're never going to get there now. Don't be so sure, she called back. Throw me a rope. I'll see if I can tow you. But the boat must weigh a ton. Not on the water it doesn't, so long as I can get some momentum going with my tail. We do in PE all the time. Are you sure? Let's just give it a try, okay? Okay, I said uncertainly, and with a flick of her tail, she was gone. Shona's tail, of course, not a shark's fin at all. I made my way up to the front deck, untied a rope and threw it down. Mom came with me. I tried to avoid looking at her, but I could feel her eyes boring in the side of my face. What? I asked, without turning to her. Is she a friend of yours? Mom asked carefully. Mm-hmm. Mom sighed. We've got a lot of catching up to do, don't we, sweetie? I carried on, looking ahead. Do you think I'm a freak? A freak? Mom reached over to pick up one of my hands. Darling, I couldn't be more proud. Still holding my hand, she put her other arm around me. The boat was leveled out again, and I snuggled into Mom's shoulder, wet, cold, and frightened. Neither of us spoke for a few minutes while we watched Shona pull us ever nearer to the prison, and Jake. A few moments later, Mom and I caught each other's eyes. The same thought came into our minds. Where's Mr. Beeston? He must be hiding, Mom said. I think we should check it out. Mom stood up. I'll go. I'm coming with you. She didn't argue. As we stood up and edged our way down the side of the boat, the deck was still soaking, and it was slippery at trip to the door. I pushed my head inside. Mr. Beeson was standing by a window in the saloon, his back to us. The window pushed open and a large shell in his hands. A conch? What on earth is he doing with that? Mom whispered. Mr. Beeston put the shell to his mouth. Talking to it? I whispered back. He muttered quietly in the shell. What is he saying? I looked at Mom. I don't know why I'm hiccuping so much. Jeez. She shook her head. Stay here, she ordered. Crouch down behind the door. Don't let him see you. I'll be back in a second. What are you going to do? But she slid back outside. I hunched low and waited for her to return. 2 minutes later, Mom was back with a huge fishing net in her arms. What are you going to do with... Mom shushed me with a finger over her lips and crept inside. She beckoned me to follow. Mr. Beeston was still leaning out of the window, talking softly into his conch. Mom inched toward him. I tiptoed behind her. When we were right behind him, she passed me one of the ends of the net and mouthed, 3, 2... When she mouthed 1, I threw my side of the net over Mr. Beeson's head. Mom did the same on her side. What the? Mr. Beeson dropped the conch and it fell into the chair. Quick, wrap it around, Mom urged. I ran in a circle, around him, dragging the net with me. Mr. Beeston struggled and lashed out, but we kept rapping like when someone's dog runs up to you in the park and knots your ankles together with a leash. Only better. Mom pushed him back into his chair and lifted his legs up. Get his feet, she demanded, dodging his kicks. I slipped under his legs with the net. There was still tons of net left over, so I ran around him again and again, fastening him to his chair. Mom grabbed my end of the net and tied it securely to hers, and we stood back to admire her work. You won't get away with this, you know, Mr. Beeson said, struggling and trying to kick out. All he managed to do was make his chair wobble on its legs. I wouldn't do it that if I were you, a voice suddenly boomed from the other side of the saloon. We all turned to see Millie, clambering up off the sofa. She stood majestically in the center of the room, arms raised as though waiting for a voice from heaven. I put my back out for weeks once, falling backwards off a chair. Had to see a chiropractor for 6 months, and they're not cheap, I can tell you. She swept into the galley. Okay, who's ready for a nice hot cup of tea? She asked. I'm parched. The sea had calmed down, and the three of us drank our tea on the front deck. The sky sparkled with dancing colors as we watched the lights dance as the bleh. I don't know what it is for me today, but I am like, ugh. As we watched the lights dance faster and faster, pink, blue, green, gold, every color you could imagine, in a million different shades, jumping around, stabbing at the water as though were too hot for them to settle. It seemed as though the lights were speaking in an alien language that I had no chance of understanding. Millie looked at them intently for a while, then sipped her cup of tea. I don't know what they put in this, she said, draining the cup, and headed back inside, but I've got to get some. Mom buttoned up her coat, her eyes fixed on the lights. All of this, she whispered, I remember it all. I remember it all. Do you remember my dad? I asked nervously, recalling what happened last night. Had tried to find out about him. We never meant it to happen, she said, her eyes misting over. He told me right from the start how dangerous it could be. It was after the regatta. The regatta? We used to hold it every year, but that was the last one. I don't know how we went so wrong. Well, we did. It went with bleh. I went with Mrs. Brigg. We used to run the Sea View B&B. She had a little two-person yacht. We got into trouble on the rocks. That was when I met Jake. She looked at me for the first time. Your father, she added, looking away again. I don't know what happened to Mrs. Brigg. She moved away soon after, but Jake and I, well, I couldn't help it. I went back to Rainbow Rocks every night. Rainbow Rocks? Well, near enough. I waited by those rocks you took me to, you know? Yes, I know. She smiled sadly. You know, you knew more than I did, but not anymore. I remember it all. So did he come? She shook her head. I waited every night. Then one night I told myself I'd give it one last try before giving it up. I just wanted to thank him. She turned to face me again. He saved my life, Emily. And he came? She smiled. He'd been there every night. Every night? But you said he had hidden himself. But he had seen me every time I went. Said he couldn't keep away either. But he couldn't bring himself to talk to me. Why not? You know that first time when he helped us, he never got out of the water, Mom laughed. I thought at the time, what an amazing swimmer. So you didn't know. He thought I'd be shocked or disgusted or something. I took a deep breath, and were you? Mom put her hand out to me, cupped my chin. Emily, when I saw his tail, when I knew what he was, I think that was the moment I fell in love with him. Really? She smiled. Really? So then what happened? Well, that was when I left home. Left home? You mean Nan and Granddad used to live here? Mom swallowed hard. I remember why we argued now. They wouldn't believe me. They thought I was crazy. They tried to make me see a psychiatrist, and you wouldn't? She shook her head. So then they sold off everything and moved away from the ocean for good. They gave me an ultimatum. Either I come with them or they didn't want to know anything about you. I finished her sentence for her. The boat was your granddad's. He didn't want anything to do with it, or me. Said he had enough of the sea to last him a lifetime. He gave it to you? She nodded. I think I like to think the gesture meant that part of him knew it was true, that he knew I wasn't crazy. And what about Jake? I used to sail out to sea to meet him, or around to Rainbow Rocks. Was that where they caught him? She dabbed the edge of her eye with the palm of her hand. I never believed it would happen, she said. Somehow I thought everything would be all right, especially after you were born. How come they didn't make you move away? Maybe they wanted to keep an eye on us. Or on me, you mean? She pulled me close, hugging me tight. Oh, Emily, she whispered into my hair. You only saw him once. You were so tiny. I'm going to see him again, Mom, I said, my voice coming out in a squeak. I'm going to find him. She smiled at me through misty eyes. I am. A moment later, I noticed Shona swimming around to the side of the boat. We're nearly there, she said. Are you coming in? I looked at Mom. Is it okay? I asked. For an answer, she pulled me tighter. Then she let me go. I ran inside and changed into my swimsuit. Millie came back out with me. I perched on the edge of the boat. See you, I smiled. Mom swallowed hard and held Millie's hand as I jumped into the water. Within seconds, I felt my tail form. My legs melted and stretched, spreading warmth through my whole body. I waved to Mom and Millie as they watched me from the front deck. Look, I shouted, and then ducked under the water. I flicked my tail as gracefully as I could, waving it from side to side, while I stretched out in a downward handstand. When I came back up, Mom was clapping. Beautiful, she called, wiping her hand across her eye. She blew me a kiss as I grinned at her. Millie's eyes widened. She shook her head, then picked up Mom's cup of tea and finished that one off too. Are you ready? Shona asked. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, and we set off. The Great Murmur Reef isn't like anything you've ever likely seen in your life. It's the highest, widest, longest wall in the world. In the universe, made out of rainbow colored coral, miles and miles from anywhere, smack in the middle of the sea. You don't realize what it is at first. It feels like the end of the world, stretching up and down farther than you can see in every direction. I shielded my eyes from the brightness. It reminded me of the school dance we had at our graduation at the end of last year. They borrowed a machine that threw disco lights across the room, swirling around and changing color in time with the music. The Great Murmur Reef was a bit like that, but about 1,000,000 times bigger and brighter. The colors swirled and flashed even more. And somehow we had to get past it. It was the only way to the prison. As we got closer, the swirling lights became laser beam rays, shooting out at every angle from jagged layers of coral heaped upon coral. Sharp, spiky rocks were piled all the way up to the surface, and higher with soft, rubbery bushes buried in every crevice, and the brightest purples and yellows and greens you've ever seen. A moving bush like a silver Christmas tree flapped towards us. Two spotted shrimp dragged a starfish along the seabed. All around us, fish and plants bustled and rustled about, but we were stuck in a fortress of bubbles and bushes and rocks. We couldn't even climb over the top. It was way too high and rough. Above the water, the coral shot diamond rays where it sparkled with stones like cut glass. I was never, ever going to find him. It's hopeless, I said, trying desperately not to cry. It was like that darn game about going on a bear hunt. You keep coming across things that you've got to pass. Bleh. You keep coming across things that you've got to get past. We can't get over it. We can't get under it. Shona was by my side, her eyes bright like a coral. We'll have to get through it, she exclaimed, the words gurgling away in multicolored bubbles. There's bound to be a gap somewhere. Come on, she pulled at my arm and dove deeper. We weaved in and out the spaghetti-fringed tubes and swam into bushes with tentacles that opened wide enough to swim inside, but it was the same every time, a dead end. I perched on a rock, ready to give up, while Shona scaled the coral, tapping it with her fingers like a builder testing the thickness of a wall. A huge shoal of fish that had been sheltering in the cave suddenly darted out as one writhing and spinning like a kaleidoscope pattern. I stared transfixed. I think I've found something. Shona's voice jolted me out of a trance. She was scratching at the coral, and I swam closer to see what she'd found. Look! She scrabbled some more, bits of coral crumbling away like dust in her fingers. She pulled me around and made me look closer. What can you see? she asked. I can't see anything. Look harder. What at? Shona pushed her face closer to mine and pointed into the jagged hole she'd scraped away. She pushed her fist into it and pulled out some more dust. It floated away, dancing around us as she scraped. It's a weak point, she said. This stuff's millions of years old. I'm pretty sure they have people who check the perimeter and maintain it and stuff, but there's always going to be a bit of it that they miss. I pushed my own hand into the hole and scrabbled at it with my fingertips as though I were digging a hole in the sand. I felt different. It felt different from the rest of the wall, softer. I pushed farther, scrambling and scraping. We'd soon scooped out a way up to our shoulders, white dust clouds billowing around us. Now what? I asked. Make it wider, big enough to swim through. We worked silently at the hole. The coral didn't glint and glisten with the colors once. As we got inside it, we scraped and scratched into the darkness. Eventually, as my arms were going numb and my whole body was aching and itching from the dust particles swirling all around us, Shona grabbed my arm. I looked up and saw it, the tiniest flicker of light ahead of us. We're through, I gasped. Nearly, come on. Filled with hope, I punched my fist deep into the hole, scratching my hand as I pulled at the wall. The hole grew bigger and rounder, eventually large enough to get through. I turned to Shona. Go on, you first, she urged. You're smaller than me. I scrunched my arms tightly against my body and flicked my tail gently. Then, scratching my arms and tail on the sides, I slid through the hole. Once on the other side, I turned and carried on scraping so Shona could get through the well. But nothing came away in my hands. No dust. I cut my fingers against jagged rock. I can't make it bigger, I called through the hole. Me neither, Shona replied, her voice echoing inside the dark cavern I had left behind. Try to squeeze through. Shona's head came close to the hole. It's my shoulders. I'm too big, she said. I'll never manage it. Should I pull you through? I just can't do it. Shona backed away from the gap. I'll get stuck, and then you won't be able to get back through. I can't do it without you, my voice shook as it rippled through the water to her. I'll promise. I'll wait here. Promise? Promise. I'll wait to the end of the end of the tunnel. I took a deep breath. This is it, then, I said, poking my head into the opening. Good luck. Yeah. I backed away from the hole again. And thanks, I added, for everything. You're the best friend anyone could want. Shona's eyes shone brighter in the darkness. You are? You mean it? You. There was no way I'd been. There was no way I'd been as good as a friend as she had. I didn't tell her that, though. I didn't want her to change her mind. Then I turned away from the hole, leaving the great murmur reef behind me. I swam towards a dark maze of caves, covered in sharp, jagged pieces of coral. I'm going to see my dad, I whispered, trying out the unfamiliar thought and desperately hoping it could be true. Thank you for listening to chapter 12 of Emily Windsnap. Actually, it's 13. Sorry. Thank you for listening. All our socials are down below. Please check it out. Instagram with art and as well as our Patreon. So please check out our Patreon if you would like to support us there. I hope you have a nice evening wherever you are. Have a nice day and I'll look out. Peace.